This is Daf Yomi Gemara Basra Daf Yud Dalid, and we pick it up at the bottom of Yud Gimel Amid Beis, about 12 lines in the bottom. The first word on line is Tanu Rabbanan. Once we're discussing different cases of Kisvei HaKodesh and splitting them, dividing them, etc. Continues the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan Madvik Adam Teira Nevi'im Uksuvim Ke'echad Devi Rabbi Meir Rabbi Meir Teir Mivnei Yatzid Devi Mivnei Yatzid Uksuvim Mivnei Yatzmai. Are you allowed to combine scrolls of different parts of Tanakh together? Says Rav Yehuda, yes. You could combine all of Tanakh into one large scroll. Says Rav Meir, Says Rav Yehuda, no, each one has to be by themselves. Each one of the Nevi'im should be by themselves. V'amar Rav Yehuda, Ma'aser Baises Ben Zaynim Shayolay Shmoina Nevi'im. Midubakim Kechan, it ain't Nevi'im combined as one. I'll be Rav Loz Ben Azariah. Some say no, that's not actually what happened. He had each of the Nevi'im by itself. Amar Rabbi, Ma'aser V'levaneinu Tayra Nevi'im Uksuvim Midubakim Ki Echad V'Kisharnam. They brought me them all together, and I said it's kosher. Bein chomish lechomish shal Torah arba shitim. Says the Gemara, between one chomish of and the next, you put 4 lines, and of course this is what we have in our Sifrei Torah, between Bereshis to Shemai, Shemais to Vayikra, and so forth. You put a 4-line gap. Bein kol navi lenavi, you have as well 4 lines. Benavi shal shnei asar gimel shitim. But the navi of Trei Asar, then you only leave 3 lines. When you finish at the bottom, maschal milmalan, you don't have to leave an extra blank space. And that is l'maisa, how one were to write if they were to combine different parts of Tanakh. Tanaraban, haray to the davek ter nevi'im uksuvim ke'achad madvik. If one wants to combine all of Tanakh together, he could. V'aisa b'roisha kedei lagul. And at the beginning, you have to leave enough space, lagul amud, to roll it onto the pole. And at the end, you don't leave just enough space to wind it on the pole. At the end, you leave a blank space that's big enough to wind around the entire circumference of the scroll. When you finish at the bottom, you don't have to leave any extra space. And if you want to cut and you want to divide one of the svarim from the next, that is allowed. End of Brisa. Says Gemara, my cover, what exactly is the Brisa saying? Of course you can separate them. Explains Gemara, that because if you want to cut it, you're able to do so. That is the reason why it's explaining, that when you end one column on the bottom and you start the next one at the top, the reason you do that is so that if you want to split it, you're able to split it. Says the Gemara Reminu. We want to ask a stira on one of the dinim we just said. We just said a din that if how much space, does one leave on the bottom, not the bottom, at the end, of a scroll, enough to wrap around the whole scroll. So says the Bryce, so the beginning and the end are the same. What does that mean? Then the end makes no sense because we said you have to be enough to round around the whole circumference. If it means track around the whole circumference, we said at the beginning it has to just be able to go around the pole. So says the Gemara 5 lines down, you have to split it in half. Like we said in the beginning, it's what? To wrap around the pole. And at the end, it is the circumference to wrap around the entire scroll. Rav Ashi Amar Kitanya Hi b'Sefer Torah Kedetanya. Kol Asar Niglalim Mitchilas L'Seifa, and all Svarim you roll from beginning to end. B'Sefer Torah Niglalim Siyasai, but a Sefer Torah you roll to the middle. Meaning, by all Svarim you want to roll it all up, as we know by, let's say, the Megillah. Most obviously, you roll it and you keep it at the beginning, but a Sefer Torah you roll to the middle. V'Aisalei Amud, and you make one pole onto the V'Aisalei Amud, Eloch ve'Eloch by a Sefer Torah on both sides. Amar Rav Lazar Rav Sadeh Kacha Ekaisin Svarim Sheb Yushalayim. Oisin Sifreim. That's how they would make their Sifrei Torah, that they roll to the middle with poles on either side. Taner Rabbanan continues the Gemara. Oisin Sefer Torah like Arko Yisrael like Kefai Yisrael Arko. The length should not be more than the circumference of the entire wrapping it around the Torah, nor should the circumference be more than the length, meaning the height of the parchment. Shalu as Rabbi Shir Sefer Torah Bekamo. What is the share of a Sefer Torah? How tall should it be? Said Rabbi Amar Lahan, Bigvil Shisha. If using Gvil, which is the type of parchment, it's 6 tefachim tall. Beklaf Bekama, said Rabbi Eini Yoidea. I don't know. Meaning, you just have to figure out how much, when you finish the height, it will be the same height as the circumference of a Sefer Torah. Rav Huna, about 15 lines down. The first line is Rav Huna. Rav Huna Kasav, Shivin Sifrin Darais. Rav Huna wrote 70 Sifrei Torah in his lifetime. And only one of them didn't work out, that the circumference of the Sefer Torah matched the height. Rav Achbar Yaakov Kasav Chad wrote one Torah, Amashche di Gulam, on calfskin, Visramulei, and it worked out. Yavu Bey, Rabbanan Yinayu v'nach nafshei. The Rabbanan looked at Rav Achbar Yaakov, and he was nifter. The Ayin Hara, I guess we could call it, by the Rabbanan, looking at him, wondering how he was able to perform such an incredible feat, caused his petira. Amru le Rabbanan le Rav Hamnuna. Kosav Rav Ami Arba Mea Sifrei Torah. We heard that Rav Ami wrote 400 Sifrei Torah. Amr leho Delma Torah Tzivalanu Moshe Kosav. Maybe it just means he wrote Torah Tzivalanu Moshe 400 times. Amr le Rav Zera Nata Rabbi Yani Arba Mea Karmi. He planted 400 vineyards. Amr le Rav Zera responded Delma Shteim. Maybe what it means is there's only 5 of them, 2 opposite 2 with 1 at the end. And what does it mean? It was considered to be 400. Is that in Eretz Yisrael, he planted these 5 vines in such a manner, and 400 vineyards in Eretz Yisrael. So it's as if he planted the 400 full vineyards, because he did it for the sake of Yisha of Eretz Yisrael. So Meisvei says the Gemara, let's go back. We just said, how tall should a Sefer Torah be? It should be 6 tefachim, said Rabbi, and that's going to be the circumference. Meisvei Aron Shasa Moshe. Let's go into the dimensions of the Aron. The Aron that Moshe Rabbeinu made, Amasayim v'chatzi arkav, Amma v'chatzi rachba, 2.5 long by 1.5 wide, Amma v'chatzi kaimasay, 1.5 tall, Amma b'shisha tefachim. Says the Gemara, and Amma has 6 tefachim. So it comes out that the Aron was 15 tefachim tall, long, 9 tefachim wide. V'aluchais, and how big were the luchais? Arka and Shisha v'rachav and Shisha. And the luchais were 6 by 6. Va'avi and Shleisha by 3 wide. Munachas keneged arka shel Aron, and the luchas were lying on the length of the Aron. So kama luchais oichlais b'Aron. How much space are the luchas taking up in the Aron? Shneim asar tfachim. Because the luchas are 6 by 6, we have 2 of them, and therefore the luchas are taking up 12 tefachim. So how much room is left inside the Aron? We have 3 tefachim left on the length. Same man tefach, we have to remove a tefach. Why? Chetzi of the kaisel zeh, chetzi of the kaisel zeh. Half of the width of the wall was a chetzi tefach. 2 chetzi tefachim equal 1 tefach. Nishtayru, what do we left? Sham shnei tefachim. We have left 2 tefachim. So the interior of the Aron is a mere 2 tefachim after you get rid of the luchais. Shebahan, Sefer Torah Munach. And that is where the Sefer Torah was. Shenamar, as the Pasuk says, Ein ba'aron rak shnei luchais avanim asher iniach sham Moshe v'kaimer. That was in the Aron. What does the Pasuk mean? V'kaimer ma'in ba'aron. What does it mean? There was none of the Aron. Rak, the word rak, of course, is a miyut. So it means it wasn't only the luchais, but it was the luchais Plus, what is it being marbe? Sefer Torah shemunach ba'aroin. Sefer Torah is in the aron. Okay, so now we know the Sefer Torah is in the aron, but there's not a lot of space left. Pirnasta aron la'arkai. We figured out parnasa. We've accounted for the length of the aron. Seyu parnas aron l'rachmai. How much width is left in the aron? Kamaluchas eichles. Let's start and do the math again. How much do luchas take up? Ba'aron shisha tvachim, 6 tvachim. Nishtayru sham shleisha tvachim. So we have 3 tvachim left. Semi tefach. So we remove a tefach again. Chetzik kosev, chetzik kosev zeh. So how much is left now? Nishtayru sham shnei tvachim. Shlei sefer Torah nichnas v'yotzeg shudachuk. So we have 2 tvachim left. And why do we have 2 tefachim left? Because when the Sefer Torah is put in and put out, you don't want it to be snug fit. Because if it's snug fit, it's going to bump into against the walls. Divrei Rebbe Meir. Rav Yehuda Imer ba'ama bas chamisha tefachim. Says Rav Yehuda. Let's do all the math again. Valuchas arkan shisha barachvan shisha vavian shleisha munachas barkush ala araim. But how long is the length of the aron if we use tefachim of of 5 tefachim. Again, it's the same 12 tefachim because the luchas were listed in tefachim. But how much space inside the aron is? Nishtayru sham only achatzi tefach. Etzveli koisel zeh, etzveli koisel zeh. Parnas aron the ark. I say parnas aron the rach. Let's figure out the width. Kamaluchais oigdois ba'aron. How much of the width did the luchais take up? Shisha tefachim. Nishayir sham tefach umechsel. Semin chatzi tefach etzba umechsel likois zev. Etzba umechsel likois zen. Nishayir sham tefach shaboy oimdim amudim. And that last tefach, according to Rav Yehuda, says the Gemara, was needed for what? Was for the amudim were there on each side of the luchais. Shenamar. As the pasuk says, "Apirion aslei amelch shleimim mati elvanov amudam aslei kesef refi daslei zov mir kamoy argamon." That Shlomo Amelech made his kisi akavod from the wood from Lebanon wood, and he had pillars of silver, gold, and the sea was purple, etc. So this, when it says the kisei, doesn't mean his actual kisei. This is referring to the aron. So these were the silver amudim that are placed inside the aron. V'goymer continues Rabbi Yehuda v'argush sheshigra by Plishtin dairan lelekei Yisrael, and the chest in which the Plishtin sent to Klal Yisrael, munach mitzidai, was placed at the side of the aron. Shneimar v'sklei hazav asher shvosam loi asham tasimu ba'argez mitzidai. So in the Beis Hamikdash, next to the aron, was an interesting chest, we'll call it. I guess that's the right word. And we continue v'shalachtan isai v'holach. The pasuk concludes that send it away. So this chest remains at the side of the aron when it was in the aron, when it was in the Kodesh HaKodashim. The alav Sefer Torah munach. On that chest is where the Sefer Torah was. Shenamar lakuach Sefer Torah. Again, this is according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda does not have enough room inside the aron for the Sefer Torah. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, he has to bring more psukim, proving that the aron wasn't inside the Sefer Torah was not inside the aron, but rather was at the side. Shenamar lakuach Sefer Torah zev tamto yisem mitzad aron bris Hashem mitzad hu munach v'loy b'toichai. So says the Gemara that the aron was at the side of the Sefer Torah. Excuse me again. Was at the side of the aron v'loy b'toichai, not inside the aron. Mani bekayim. So what does Rabbi Yehuda do with the pasuk? Mani bekayim in ba'aron rak le rabbis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, shivrei lucha shemracham ba'aron. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's fascinating. We have a fundamental machlekes. What was inside the aron? Now, we didn't really get to our whole question. Our question that we're getting to is figuring out how big the Sefer Torah was. So it concludes the Gemara on the top of Yudalad Beis. Like Rabbi taught us that how big is the Sefer Torah? 6 tefachim. The Sefer Torah keeps above tefachim mechti. Now, how do we figure out the width if we know the hekif, if we know the circumference was 6 tefachim? So if the kefah is 6 tefachim, yish b'reichav tefach. The kivan to them soy niklal, and since it was rolled up to the middle, nafesh le mitri tivcha. You got to account for a little bit more ravcha debeni ubeni, a little bit more, because it's going to be a space between, as you roll up a sefer Torah, you're going to have a little space in the middle. Betray poshchi Eicha Yosef. So we have one big question. If we have only 2 tefachim left, where in the world, how can you get a Sefer Torah into 2 tefachim that was in the Aron? Meaning it's true, if it's a 6 tefach circumference, it will be 2 tefachim wide, but there's also the little space in between, so we're lacking a little bit of space. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov Sefer. Guess what? Says Rav Yaakov. The Sefer Torah in the Aron HaKodesh was now rolled to the middle. It was rolled the end to the beginning. Therefore, it was 2 tefachim wide. Says Marvakati betray Yosef. You 2 into 2 doesn't work. You need to have a little bit more to fit it in. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi, Tekarach Be Porta Vekarkei. Le'el. A little bit was rolled separately and was put on top of it. It was sort of like folded over, which thereby made it narrower than 2 tefachim, and that's how it fit into the Aron. The Gemara continues to ask for Rav Yehuda. According to Rav Yehuda, was this interesting shita that the Sefer Torah was placed next to the Aron on this chest that they got from the Plishtim. Says the Gemara, but in history we have a kasha. Rav Yehuda Makbi Delesi Argi Sefer Torah Hey Chavi Yosvi. Before they got this chest from the Plishtim, where was the Sefer Torah lying? Once they had the chest from the Plishtim, I understand. But before that, where was the Sefer Torah lying? Says the Gemara, there was a board that was coming out of the Aron, and the Sefer Torah was on that. So it comes out a fascinating machlekes where the Sefer Torah was placed on the Aron in the Kodesh HaKodashim. According to Rav Meir, it was inside. According to Rav Yehuda, it was either on a chest next door to the Aron or on a shelf protruding out to the side. Continues the Gemara of Rav Meir, about 12 lines down. The first line is Torah. Rav Meir, Haimisad Aron, my Avidle. What does Rav Meir do with the pasuk that says that the Sefer Torah was mitzad the Aron, which seemingly indicates like Rav Yehuda? Explains the Gemara. Whom Rav Meir uses pasuk the mitnach le bitzad. It was at the side of the luchais lo mitnach beinei luchai. It wasn't between the luchais. So olam megavei minatzad. It was inside, but it was on this side. Continues the Gemara, according to Rav Meir, amudim echav kaimi. Where were the amudim? Where were the poles on the Aron? Says the Gemara, mibrai. They're on the outside of the Aron. For Rav Meir, according to Rav Meir, shivrei luchais to menachem and Aron minali. Where does Rav Meir know that the shivrei luchais were placed inside the Aron? Says the Gemara, nafalei mit Rav Huna. Davar Rav Huna, ma'idich sev. What is the meaning of the pasuk? Asher nikrav sham shem Hashem savakis. What is the meaning of the pasuk that says, call the name of Hashem savakis yeshiv keruvim alav, who's on top of the keruvim? Malamed, from here we learn shaluch sheviluchs menachem ba'aroin. Ve'edach, what does Rav Yehuda do with this pasuk? Homi ba'ilelech Rav Yechlan, Rav Yechlan, Rav Shemin Yochai. Says the Hiliga Rashbi minayin l'shah shem v'chol kinuyam menachem ba'aroin. How do you know that the shem and all the kinuyam for Hashem are placed in the Aron? We learn it out from this pasuk. Ve'edach nami ba'ilei lahachi. We need the pasuk to teach us this. Einachanami ella shivrei luchas menachem ba'aroin minalei. So says the Gemara, so where does he know that Shivrei Luchas are placed in the Aron? Nafkalei mit the Tani Rav Yosef. The Tani Rav Yosef Shershi Barta V'samtem. They broke in their place. V'lavich Luchas Shivrei Luchas Menachem Ba'aron. Says the Gemara, okay, Gevaldik. Vedach, and what does Rav Yehuda do? Whom Yibayel Reish Lakish. 5 lines from the white lines. Am Reish Lakish. Shershi Barta Amalei Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe. Yasher Koichacha Shershi Barta. He says Hashem Moshe Rabbeinu Shkoyach. It was the right thing that you did, that you broke the luchais. Continues the Gemara, 3 lines from the white line. Son Rabban, Sidra and Shel Nevi'im. The order of the Nevi'im, Yeshua v'Shaiftim Shmuel Malachim Yirmiyah v'Yechazkel Yeshaya Shteim Asar. Says the Gemara, that's the order of the Nevi'im. Continues the Gemara, Michti. Moshe came first. Says the Gemara, but how do we reconcile this? You tell me that the first of the Nevi'im was Hoisheya. V'amar Rav Yechla explains Rav Yechla sheyetachila l'arba'ah neviim. He was the first of the 4 neviim shenisnamdu bois haparik to send nevuah in that time. Biluhain. And who are these 4 neviim? These were on this third wide line. Hoisheya, Yeshaya, Amos, Umicha. Says the Gemara v'lakdim Hoshea bereisha. So Hoshea should have been first. Kivan dechsev nevuasei gabi Chagis Chariv Malaches. So Hoshea's nevuah was written down at the same time as Chagis Chariv Malaches. Chagis Chariv Malaches Soif Neviim Ave. They were the end of the Neviim. Therefore, Chashev Lehut Leba Adaya. Therefore, Hoshea is listed together with them, even though in reality, yes, he was first. That's Marv. So why don't we just write Hoshea as separate sefer, and therefore it should have been written beforehand? I did Zutar Mirchas, because it's a small book, it would be lost if it was its own book, and therefore Hoshea is part of Trei Asar, and that's where Hoshea is listed. Continues the Gemara. Mechti, 1 second. Yeshaya kadem Yirmiyahu, v'Yechezkel likadem Yeshaya bereisha. Given the Malachim Seivi Charbane, the Malachim were at the end of the Chorban of Yirmiyahu, Koila Charbane, v'Yechezkel Reishe Charbane, v'Seifa Nechemta, v'Yeshua Kula Nechemta. Therefore, Zachid Charbane, Lechabanim Nechemta, Nechemta. We put the Chorbans next to each other and the Nechama next to each other. Continues the Gemara, Sitchin Shel Ksuvim. What is the order of Ksuvim? Ross, Sefer Te'elim, V'iyav, V'Mishlei, Kal, Shir, Shir, Mekinis, Daniel, Megillah, Esther, Ezra, V'Divrei Hayam. Says the Gemara, 7 lines to the bottom. The first line is Ezra Lamandam, Hariyah, V'Mei Moshe, Ayah, Lekadmi Liyah, Bereisha, Yov should have been first. Explains the Gemara, we don't want to start with punishments, which of course is the book of Eov. Rosnami Parnias, he says, Gemara Parnias, the Islay Acharis. Yes, it was punishment, but it had a good ending. David, because David Amal came from Rosh, that he satiated Kadosh Baruch Hu b'shirais u'b'tishbachais. Yeah? Says the Gemara as we wrap up the Daf Mi Kasvan, and who is the one that authored the Sfarim? Moshe Kasav Sifrai u'Parshas Bilam. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah, wrote the Parsha Bilam, and wrote V'Iyov. Yeshua Kasav Sifroi, Yeshua wrote Sefer Yeshua. Ushmaina Psukim Shabbat Torah, and the 8 Psukim of the Torah which dictate Moshe Rabbeinu's Ptira. Shmuel Kasav Sifroi V'Shaiftim. Rus David Kasav. Rus was written. No, I read that wrong. Shmuel Kasav Sifroi V'Shaiftim V'Rus. David Kasav Sefer Tilim Alidei Asar Zekinim. Who are the Asar Zekinim? Alidei Adam Arishain, Alidei Malkisedek, Alidei Avram, Alidei Moshe, Alidei Haman, Alidei Yedaisan, Alidei Asaf. The tab of Tezvav Amnal, one of the pages, so let's read it together for a moment. Alidei Shloshim b'nei Kairach, Yirmiyah Kosav Sifra, V'Sifra Malachim V'Kinis, Chizkiah V'Siyatei Kasvu, Chizkiah wrote with his assistants, Yeshaya Mishlei Shir Shirim, and Koheles, which of course is interesting, because we know that Shir Shirim and Koheles was written by David HaMelech, but the Gemara here says that Yirmiyah was indeed the one that wrote it down. Kasvu Yechezkel Shemos Daniel Megillas Esther Ezra Kasav Sifroi V'Yachash Shel Divrei Yamad Loi until himself. Messiah the Ravs, the right Rav Zamar V'Yudam Rav Loyal Elus Mivavel Chichis Atzmai V'Allah Uman Askein who finished the book Nechemya ben Chaklaya. And we'll stop over here and pick it up as Siyat the Shemaya from the top of this Vav Amid Aleph.